Chapter 1. The Awakening of the Starseeker. The village of Hinode lay nestled in a valley beneath the towering peaks of Mount Tsukuyomi, where time seemed to stand still. Aya, a 22-year-old woman with a deep-seated sense of adventure, was no stranger to the peace and simplicity of her home. But as the Star Festival began, celebrating the celestial beings known as ethereals, Aya felt an unsettling restlessness she couldn't ignore. The night sky above was filled with glowing lanterns, each one a symbol of hope and reverence for the ethereals who watched over the world. The villagers danced and sang, their joy filling the air, but Aya's gaze remained fixed on the stars. For weeks, she had been plagued by strange dreams, visions of a distant star calling out to her, drawing her closer to an unknown destiny. As the festival reached its peak, a brilliant light streaked across the sky, and a falling star crashed into the nearby forest with a deafening roar. Aya felt a pull within her, an undeniable force that compelled her to leave the celebration and venture into the dark woods alone. The forest was silent as she made her way through the trees, the air thick with a strange, otherworldly energy. At the center of a smoldering crater, she found a glowing shard embedded in the ground. The shard pulsed with an eerie light, and as Aya reached out to touch it, a voice echoed in her mind. "Aya!" The shard dissolved into a shimmering mist, swirling around her before merging with her body. Aya gasped as a surge of power coursed through her, and a figure began to materialize before her eyes. A tall, ethereal woman with silver hair and eyes like stars appeared, her presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "I am Astra, the ethereal of the stars," the woman spoke, her voice like a melody carried on the wind. "You have been chosen as the Starseeker, Aya. The balance of the realms is in jeopardy, and only you can restore it." Before Aya could fully comprehend what was happening, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. The creature, a twisted mass of shadows and claws, lunged at her with terrifying speed. Astra stepped forward, her hand raised in a protective gesture, but the creature's attack was relentless. "Abyssal," Astra hissed. "Stay back, Aya." Instinctively, Aya raised her hands, and a barrier of light erupted between her and the Abyssal. The impact threw her to the ground, but the barrier held, shimmering with Astra's energy. "Focus, Aya," Astra urged, her voice calm despite the danger. "Use your power. You can do this." Gathering her strength, Aya concentrated on the light within her, willing it to take form. The barrier expanded, pushing the Abyssal back. With a fierce cry, Aya unleashed a burst of energy that sent the creature hurtling into the trees. Breathing heavily, Aya looked at Astra, who smiled faintly. "Well done, Starseeker, but this is only the beginning. We must leave this place. There are others who seek the power you now possess." Aya nodded, still reeling from the encounter. As they made their way back to the village, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn she could never have anticipated. "What happens now?" Aya asked, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. "Now," Astra replied, her eyes serious, "we find the others. You are not alone in this, Aya, but we must hurry. The darkness is growing, and time is not on our side." Chapter 2. The gathering of allies, Aya and Astra's journey, took them far from Hinode, across vast plains, through dense forests, and into bustling cities. Each step brought Aya closer to understanding the immense responsibility she now carried. Astra had guided them to Emberfall, a city known for its towering walls and ever-burning forges, in search of another ethereal-bound warrior. As they entered Emberfall, Aya could feel a palpable tension in the air. The people moved quickly, their eyes filled with unease, as though they sensed the same growing darkness that Aya did. In the city's central square, a crowd had gathered, watching a fierce duel between a lone swordsman and a group of armored soldiers. The swordsman moved with deadly precision, his blade wreathed in flames as he cut through the soldiers' ranks. His every move was calculated, every strike filled with purpose. As Aya watched, she noticed the fire in his eyes, a fire that matched the flames of his blade. "That's him," Astra whispered. "Kyle, the flame-bearer. He's the one we're looking for." Aya's heart raced as she pushed through the crowd, determined to reach Kyle before the soldiers could overwhelm him. But Kyle needed no help. His final strike sent the last soldier crashing to the ground, and the flames of his sword flickered and died. "Enough!" a voice boomed across the square. A man in ornate armor stepped forward, his eyes locked on Kale with a mix of anger and fear. "Kale, surrender now, and we'll spare your life." Kale's expression remained cold and unreadable as he faced the man. Before the tension could escalate, Aya stepped forward, her determination outweighing her fear. "Wait," she called out, her voice cutting through the silence. "Kale, we need your help." Kale turned his gaze to Aya, his expression softening slightly, but before he could respond, the armored man signaled his soldiers to advance. "Stay out of this, girl," the man snarled. "This traitor is coming with us." Aya felt a surge of resolve. She had to make him understand. "He's not a traitor," she said, stepping between Kale and the soldiers. "He's one of us. We're fighting against the darkness that threatens this world, and we need his strength." The soldiers hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The armored man scowled, about to give the order to attack, but Kale stepped forward, his voice low and firm. "If you stand with her, then so do I," Kale said, his eyes locked on the man. "But if you get in our way, I won't hesitate to cut you down." The soldiers faltered, and after a tense moment, the man lowered his hand. "This isn't over, Kale," he spat, turning on his heel and retreating with his men. As the crowd dispersed, Aya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Kale turned to her, his expression softened but still guarded. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Because I know we can't do this alone," Aya replied, her eyes meeting his with unwavering determination. "We need you, Kyle." Kyle studied her for a moment before nodding. "Then let's get moving. If the darkness is spreading, we don't have time to waste." With Kyle now part of their group, Aya felt a renewed sense of hope. Together, they continued their journey, and it wasn't long before they encountered their next ally, a cunning thief named Lyra, who was bonded to the ethereal of shadows, Nyx. Lyra's quick wit and sharp tongue kept them on their toes, but beneath her playful exterior, Aya sensed a deep-seated pain. Lyra had grown up in the shadows, surviving by any means necessary, and her bond with Nyx only heightened her connection to the darkness. But Aya saw potential in her, a strength that Lyra herself didn't fully understand. As the trio traveled together, their bond grew stronger. Kyle's stoic determination, Lyra's cunning, and Aya's unwavering resolve made them a formidable team. Yet, as they ventured deeper into the unknown, Aya couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and terrible was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Chapter 3. The Trials of the Ethereal Realms. The journey led them to the entrance of the ethereal realms, mystical worlds that existed parallel to their own. Each realm was a reflection of its respective ethereal, and to gain their full power, Aya and her companions had to undergo a series of trials. The first realm they entered was Ignis's fiery domain, a world of molten lava and volcanic mountains where the air crackled with heat and energy. Kyle, as the Flamebearer, was the first to face his trial. He stood before a massive volcano, its peak belching fire and smoke into the sky. "You must confront your past," Astra told Kyle, her voice gentle yet firm. "Only by facing your guilt can you truly harness Ignis's power." Kyle's expression hardened as he approached the volcano. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and visions of his past began to swirl around him. Memories of battles fought and lives lost, of choices made in the heat of the moment that haunted him still. The trial was brutal, forcing Kale to relive his darkest moments, but with each step he grew stronger, the flames within him burning brighter. As he reached the summit, he let out a roar of defiance, the fire within him erupting in a brilliant display of power. With Kale's trial complete, they moved on to Nyx's realm, a shadowy labyrinth filled with illusions and traps. The darkness was disorienting, and Lyra struggled to keep her footing as the shadows whispered her deepest fears. "Don't let the darkness consume you," Astra warned. "Use it to your advantage." Lyra's trial tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The shadows played tricks on her mind, conjuring images of the people she had lost, the betrayals she had suffered. But Lyra was no stranger to deception, and she quickly realized that the only way to survive was to embrace the darkness within her. With a sly grin, Lyra melted into the shadows, using them to her advantage as she navigated the labyrinth with ease. By the time she emerged, she had gained a new level of control over her powers, her bond with Nyx stronger than ever. Finally, it was Aya's turn. Astra led her to the realm of the stars, a place of infinite beauty where the night sky stretched out in every direction. But Aya's trial was not one of combat or cunning. It was a test of her heart. "Aya," Astra said, her voice soft, "to truly become the Starseeker, you must understand the weight of your responsibility. You must be willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the world." Aya's trial was the most difficult of all. She was shown visions of the future, of the people she loved in danger, of the world consumed by darkness. She felt the weight of her choices, the burden of the power she now held. But she also saw hope, the possibility of a world saved by her actions. With tears in her eyes, Aya made her decision. She would do whatever it took to protect the world, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. As she accepted her fate, the stars above her shone brighter, and she felt the power of the cosmos flowing through her. The trials complete, the group emerged from the ethereal realms stronger than ever. But as they stepped back into the mortal world, they were met with a sight that chilled them to the bone. The village of Hinode, Aya's home, was under attack. Chapter 4. The Battle for Hinode. The once peaceful village of Hinode was now a battlefield. The villagers, unprepared for the onslaught, were struggling to defend themselves against the horde of abyssals that had descended upon them. The creatures, twisted and terrifying, were unlike anything Aya had ever seen before. They moved with unnatural speed, their claws slicing through wood and stone as if it were nothing. "Aya, we have to help them," Lyra shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Agreed," Kyle said, drawing his sword, which burst into flames at his command. "We take them down, one by one." Aya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was her village, her home, and she couldn't stand by and watch it be destroyed. She reached deep within herself, summoning the power of the stars, and felt a surge of energy as her hands began to glow with celestial light. "Let's do this," Aya said, her voice filled with determination. The battle was intense, with Aya, Kyle, and Lyra fighting side by side against the abyssals. Kyle's flames cut through the darkness, incinerating the creatures with every strike. Lyra moved like a shadow, her daggers flashing as she took down her enemies with deadly precision. Aya unleashed beams of starlight, each one vaporizing an abyssal on contact. But the abyssals kept coming, and it soon became clear that they were being led by something far more powerful. A figure emerged from the darkness, its form shifting and flickering as it approached. It was a monstrous being, a fusion of shadow and fire, with eyes that burned like coals. "Ethereals. The Starseeker," the creature hissed, its voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the very ground. "You cannot stop the darkness. It will consume everything." Aya stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "We won't let that happen," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. The creature let out a dark, guttural laugh. "Foolish girl, you are nothing compared to the power I wield." With a roar, the creature lunged at Aya, its claws outstretched. She barely had time to react, raising her hands to create a barrier of light. The impact sent her flying backward, and she crashed into the ground with a grunt of pain. "Aya!" Kyle shouted, rushing to her side. But the creature was relentless, its attacks growing more vicious with each passing moment. "We need to work together," Lyra called out, her voice filled with urgency. "We can't take it down alone." Aya struggled to her feet, wincing as pain shot through her body. She knew Lyra was right. They needed to combine their powers if they had any hope of defeating this creature. But as she looked around, she realized that they were running out of time. The village was burning, and the villagers were in danger. They had to act fast. "Kyle, Lyra, focus your energy on me," Aya said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll combine our powers and take it down together." Kyle and Lyra nodded, their eyes filled with resolve. They moved to Aya's side, channeling their energy into her. She could feel the heat of Kale's flames and the cool embrace of Lyra's shadows as their powers merged with her own. The creature roared in defiance, but Aya was ready. With a fierce cry, she unleashed the combined power of fire, shadow, and starlight in a blinding beam of energy that shot toward the creature. The impact was devastating, and the creature let out a final agonized scream before it was consumed by the light. As the creature disintegrated, the abyssals began to retreat, their strength fading with the death of their leader. The villagers cheered as the last of the creatures fled into the night, and Aya felt a wave of relief wash over her. But as she looked around at the destruction that had been wrought upon her village, she knew that this was only a temporary victory. The darkness was still out there, and it was growing stronger with each passing day. "We did it," Kyle said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "But I have a feeling this is far from over." Aya nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. "We need to find the source of this darkness," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "We need to stop it before it consumes everything." As they surveyed the ruins of Hinode, a cold wind blew through the village, carrying with it the faint sound of whispers. Aya shivered, a sense of foreboding settling over her. She knew that their journey was far from over, and that the true battle had only just begun. Chapter 5. The Descent into Darkness. With Hinode in ruins, Aya, Kyle, and Lyra set out on a new mission, to find the source of the darkness that threatened to consume their world. Their journey led them to the edge of the known world, to a place where the boundary between the mortal realm and the abyssal plain was thin. The land around them grew darker with each passing day, the once vibrant forests now twisted and lifeless. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and even Astra, usually so calm and composed, seemed troubled. "We're getting close," Astra said, her voice tinged with unease. "The source of the darkness is near." Aya felt a shiver run down her spine. She could feel the darkness pressing in on them, its presence growing stronger with each step. But she knew they couldn't turn back now. They had come too far, and too much was at stake. As they approached a massive, jagged mountain, a sense of foreboding washed over them. The mountain was unlike anything they had seen before. Its surface was black as night, and it seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. At its peak, a swirling vortex of darkness loomed, its depths filled with the same shadowy energy that had fueled the abyssals. "This is it," Kyle said, his voice filled with grim determination. "The source of the darkness." Aya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the power of the vortex pulling at her, a dark force that threatened to overwhelm her senses, but she pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task at hand. "We need to destroy it," she said, her voice steady despite the terror that gripped her. "We can't let it spread any further." The trio began their ascent up the mountain, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. The path was treacherous, with jagged rocks and deep chasms that seemed to appear out of nowhere. But they pressed on, driven by a sense of urgency that left no room for hesitation. As they neared the summit, the darkness grew so thick that it became difficult to see. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the air was filled with a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the vortex itself. "We're almost there," Aya said, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of sounds that surrounded them. "Just a little further." But as they reached the final stretch, the ground suddenly gave way beneath them, and they found themselves tumbling into a vast, dark cavern. The fall seemed to last forever, and when they finally hit the ground, they were surrounded by impenetrable darkness. "Astra, where are we?" Aya asked, her voice trembling with fear. This is the abyss," Astra replied, her voice filled with dread. "The heart of the darkness. We must be careful, Aya. The abyss is a place of nightmares, where your deepest fears come to life." As they stood in the darkness, a cold, menacing voice echoed through the cavern. "Welcome, Starseeker. I've been waiting for you." Aya's blood ran cold as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a being of pure darkness, its form shifting and changing with each step it took. Its eyes were voids of emptiness, and its presence filled the air with a sense of suffocating dread. "You've come so far, only to fall into my trap," the figure said, its voice a sinister whisper that seemed to seep into their minds. "You are nothing, Starseeker. Your light will be snuffed out, just like all the others." Aya clenched her fists, summoning the power of the stars as she prepared to face this new threat. But before she could act, the figure raised its hand, and a wave of darkness swept over them, engulfing them in an inky blackness that seemed to swallow all hope. In the depths of the abyss, Aya felt her strength waning, the light within her flickering as the darkness pressed in from all sides. She could hear the others calling out to her, their voices faint and distant, as if they were miles away. And then, just as all seemed lost, the darkness began to recede, and Aya found herself standing alone in a vast, empty void. The figure of darkness stood before her, its eyes locked onto hers, as if challenging her to make the first move. "This is your final trial, Starseeker," the figure said, its voice echoing in the emptiness. Prove yourself worthy, or be consumed by the darkness. Aya's heart pounded in her chest as she faced the figure, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She knew that this battle would determine the fate of the world, and that failure was not an option. But as she prepared to fight, a sudden realization struck her. The darkness wasn't just an enemy to be defeated. It was a part of her, just as much as the light. And to truly overcome it, she had to embrace both sides of herself. With a deep breath, Aya closed her eyes and let the darkness wash over her, accepting it as a part of who she was. The figure of darkness recoiled in surprise, its form flickering as it struggled to maintain its hold on her. And then, with a burst of energy, Aya unleashed the full power of the stars, merging it with the darkness within her. The void around them exploded in a blinding flash of light, and when it cleared, the figure of darkness was gone. Aya stood alone in the void, her body glowing with a radiant light that seemed to push back the shadows. She had passed the final trial, and in doing so, had unlocked the full extent of her power. But as she prepared to return to the mortal realm, a voice echoed through the void, a voice that sent a chill down her spine. "You may have won this battle, Starseeker," the voice said, "but the war is far from over." The void began to collapse around her, and Aya was pulled back into the darkness, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that the battle against the darkness was far from over, and that the true war was only just beginning. To be continued,